Accused Georgia high school shooter Colt Gray shows up to court with drastically different look, what it means for a case that shook a community. When a high-profile criminal case is already a national story, 4 people dead, 9 wounded, a community reeling, even small, human details can become headlines. One of those details arrived in a Barrow County courtroom this week. 15-year-old Colt Gray, the teen accused of the deadly September 2024 shooting at Appalachia High School, stepped into court looking profoundly different than the images many Americans remember. Gone were the sullen, unkempt photos that circulated after the attack. In their place was a short, neat haircut, glasses, and conservative, preppy attire. The transformed appearance prompted a flurry of media attention and social media chatter. Is this a legal strategy, an effort to humanize, or simply a teenager in custody who's had a haircut? The answer matters, because in a case this grim, every move is parsed for clues about intent, culpability, and the road ahead. Below, we unpack what happened at that hearing, what the charges are, how Colt Gray's changing look fits into broader legal and psychological questions, and why the case is sparking renewed debate about parental responsibility, school safety, and the criminal justice system. The hearing and the new look, optics and strategy. Images and video from the recent status hearing showed a markedly different Colt Gray, hair trimmed and styled, wearing glasses and an outfit more often seen on a college freshman than the disheveled mugshots that first circulated. Media outlets and commentators quickly noted the contrast, and legal analysts reminded the public that defendants often try to control the narrative and how jurors perceive them. In high-stakes cases, defense teams sometimes seek to present clients as composed, normal, and capable of rehabilitation. Prosecutors, meanwhile, stress accountability and the gravity of the alleged crimes. It's worth noting the context. Colt was 14 at the time of the shooting and is now 15. Because he is being prosecuted in adult court and faces the possibility of life behind bars, every court appearance carries strategic weight. Changing one's outward appearance for court is not uncommon and can be genuine. A teenager's hair grows, and detention facilities often provide basic grooming, but in the court of public opinion it's an immediate, visual symbol that invites interpretation. Does the change influence potential jurors? Will it factor into sentencing arguments if Gray is convicted? Those questions are open and important. The charges: a sweeping criminal case. Prosecutors have charged Colt Gray with dozens of counts, reported in charging documents and media reporting as more than 50 in total, including multiple counts of murder and aggravated assault for the deaths and injuries at Appalachia High School on September 4, 2024. The attack, investigators say, left 2 teachers and 2 students dead and 9 others wounded. The charges name a long list of counts intended to reflect each fatality and injury. Colt was initially 14, and the case against him has been pursued aggressively by local and state prosecutors. Colin Gray, Colt's father, has also faced criminal charges related to the case. Prosecutors allege he enabled his son's access to an AR-15 style weapon and related gear and have charged him with multiple counts, including second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and cruelty to children. The father's indictment, an arrest, drew immediate attention because it reflects a trend in some jurisdictions toward holding adults criminally responsible when a minor in their care uses a weapon to commit violent crimes. The father's legal problems amplify the complexity and public interest in the case. What prosecutors say about how the shooting unfolded. According to investigators and public filings, the alleged sequence of events is chilling in its precision. Authorities say Colt Gray smuggled an AR-15 style rifle into Appalachia High School, reportedly hidden inside a backpack because the rifle couldn't be disassembled, and waited until the moment to attack. Court filings and investigative reporting indicate that Colt spent time hiding in a restroom before initiating the attack, and that the shooting itself unfolded in minutes but left catastrophic consequences. Investigators also recovered writings, notebooks, and online postings that they say show planning and fixation on other mass shootings, details that prosecutors argue point to premeditation. This level of alleged pre-planning is important because it shapes what prosecutors will try to prove at trial, whether the act was the result of a deliberate plan or the momentary impulse of a deeply troubled teen. Evidence such as notebooks, internet searches, or social media activity can be persuasive in showing forethought, but defense lawyers often counter that adolescent brain development, mental illness, or other factors complicate the picture. Mental health evaluations and legal timelines. One central piece in the unfolding criminal process is Colt's mental health evaluation. Because he was 14 at the time of the killings and has since been evaluated under the law, courts must consider whether he is competent to stand trial and what role any psychiatric diagnosis might play in either the defense or sentencing. Reports from recent hearings indicate that Colt has undergone or is in the process of undergoing psychological evaluations, and that the timing of those assessments has affected scheduling in the case. The results could influence whether the defense pursues an insanity defense, diminished capacity arguments, or uses the findings to argue for treatment rather than punishment. Legal experts emphasize that mental health findings do not guarantee a particular outcome. Evaluations may find severe illness that affected behavior at the time of the shooting, but prosecutors can still pursue charges and argue for adult sentences if they believe the evidence supports it. And in many jurisdictions, juvenile mental health services and criminal penalties can intersect in complex ways, especially in cases where the defendant is being tried as an adult. The family background, warning signs, and missed interventions. As reporters have chronicled the case, a troubling picture of warning signs and missed opportunities has emerged. According to public records, chats, and interviews, Colt had a history of anxiety, panic attacks, and concerning online behavior. There were reports of threats and troubling posts on Discord and other platforms that drew law enforcement attention at different points. Prosecutors alleged that Colin Gray, the father, purchased firearms for his son, including the rifle said to have been used in the attack, despite knowledge of the son's instability. Authorities and local media have suggested that social services records, school absenteeism, and other interactions with child welfare systems could show that the family and institutions might have acted differently. This strand of the story is particularly painful because it compels communities and policymakers to confront difficult questions. When do parental choices become criminal negligence? How should schools, sheriffs, mental health providers, and families share responsibility for identifying and mitigating risks? Cases like this, and a few precedent-setting prosecutions around the country, are already testing those boundaries. Parental responsibility in the spotlight, legal precedents, and debates. The prosecution of Colt's father places this case in the middle of a national debate. In recent years, several high-profile cases have seen parents charged where prosecutors argue that their negligence or willful actions contributed to their child's ability to carry out a mass shooting. The debate hinges on legal doctrine. Can a parent be criminally liable for an attack their child carries out? And on public values, accountability, deterrence, and justice for victims. Commentators point to a handful of prior cases in other states that prosecutors cite when seeking to hold parents responsible for supplying weapons or failing to secure them. Supporters of such prosecutions argue that adults who provide lethal weapons to minors or who ignore clear, documented warnings should face consequences. Opponents warn of overreach and urge focus on broader systemic failures, mental health services, online radicalization, school security, and gun regulations. Legal scholars note that a successful parental prosecution often requires demonstrating a direct causal link between the adult's actions and the offense, a high bar in many circumstances, but recent convictions elsewhere suggest prosecutors can meet that burden under some factual combinations. Victims, community grief, and the human cost. It's easy and necessary to move from legalistic analysis back to the human stories at the center of this tragedy. 4 lives were lost, 2 teachers and 2 students, and 9 more people were wounded. The ripple effects across a small Georgia county have been profound. Teachers and students traumatized, families grieving, and a community struggling to make sense of how safety failed them that morning. Public vigils, memorials, and students' testimonies in court filings and local journalism reflect a community in pain and a desire for both answers and accountability. That grief is part of what fuels legislative and policy responses. Local schools have re-examined safety protocols. State lawmakers and federal advocates have recommitted to debates over school safety funding, mental health services, and gun access. But for families who lost loved ones, policy discussions are cold comfort when the classroom is where they once felt safe. How the media frames court appearances, a cautionary note. The intense focus on Colt Gray's wardrobe and grooming underscores how media framing can shape public perception. Sensational angles. Radical makeover headlines, side-by-side photo comparisons, help stories attract eyeballs, but they can oversimplify complex issues. Legal practitioners caution against letting optics eclipse evidence. Haircuts do not change charges. Clothing does not alter witness testimony or forensic records. Yet in jury selection and in broader civic discourse, appearances can matter, which is why both prosecution and defense are attuned to them. Responsible reporting, experts say, should balance courtroom theater with sober explanation of the charges, the evidentiary standards, and the legal process that will determine outcomes. For readers, that means paying attention to the substantive legal developments, filings, expert reports, witness statements, rather than being distracted by superficial transformations. Legal process ahead, plea discussions, timelines, and possible outcomes. The case remains dynamic. Reports indicate that mental health evaluations are ongoing and that defense and prosecution teams continue to exchange evidence. In some recent status hearings, attorneys have discussed possible plea options, though nothing has been finalized, and prosecutors have signaled their intent to pursue serious penalties, including life sentences if convicted in adult court. Colt has pleaded not guilty. The case timetable depends heavily on evaluation results, evidence disclosure, and court scheduling. Some reports suggest future hearings and deadlines stretching well into the next year.